Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum. Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Moulana Sulaimaan Ravat show. We are coming to you live from our studios here in Sunning Hill, Johannesburg, this beautiful Friday evening. 3 weeks now into the lockdown. Many were hoping that this would be the end of it. The president has asked us to endure for another 2 weeks. So as Muslims, we are fast approaching the month of Ramadan. Next week, this time, it will be the blessed month of Ramadan. And hopefully, 2 weeks from now, we will see a significant easing in the restrictions. But government is hard at work. They are trying their level best to contain the spread of the virus, to deal with all the associated issues pertaining to the outbreak of this virus. There's been a lot of focus, and understandably so, on health. There's also been a lot of focus on the economy. There's been a lot of focus on the impact of the outbreak of this virus and the lockdown and other restrictions on education. But another aspect also that we need to look at is the social impact and the impact on the lives of people in terms of poverty, in terms of hunger, in terms of food, in terms of social development. So joining us this evening on the program, we have Minister Lindiwe Zulu, Minister of Social Development. Minister, we thank you so much for your time this evening. Good evening and welcome to the program.
Yes, good evening and good evening to your viewers. It's Minister Lindiwe Zulu, Minister of Social Development.
Now, can you give us an overall assessment from the perspective of your department in terms of the impact from the perspective of your ministry on the country as a result of the outbreak of the virus?
Yes, we are on a state of national disaster, and I think that must remain in the minds of everybody that we are far away from the target of ensuring that we reduce the infections, but also we reduce the number of deaths in as far as we possibly can. And rightfully, we are talking about issues of health being the first on the agenda, because it's all about ensuring that the citizens of our country at this difficult time, they remain healthy as far as possible. And of course, the economy of the country, because we need to recover. The more we have a challenge of economic recovery, the more it has an impact on the social aspect of lives of ordinary citizens, many of whom are going to be out of jobs, many of whom their livelihoods, which they normally do under normal circumstances, they are unable to do so. And therefore, the social impact is going to be way higher than we can imagine. It's not only the issues of poverty, hunger, and food, of course, that is high on the agenda, because you cannot talk about healthy people, you cannot talk about the economy if the people are hungry and the people are unable to go on with the daily business of taking care of themselves. So the impact of this and the heavy burden on the state in terms of ensuring that we expand our normal safety net and broaden our safety net. The good thing about South Africa is that we've got a very good safety net which operates well under normal circumstances, but unfortunately, these are not normal. These are extraordinary circumstances that cause for extraordinary action. Our department is in the forefront, obviously, of ensuring that we will try and cover the length and breadth of our country so that those that do not have food, we do the best to reach out to those ones, especially the most vulnerable. This is the cry now that we are seeing in almost all our communities, particularly in the poor communities. People are unable to even do what they normally do when some of their children, the elderly in particular, they have children who normally send them either money or send them food. And this is not happening because the lockdown itself is making it very difficult for people to move around from one area to the next.
Can you paint a picture for our viewers? They do follow the news, they do pick up on things from time to time, but from your perspective as the minister, as the person in the know, what kind of stories are you hearing about how the poor are suffering as a result of the lockdown, and what kind of initiatives and projects are in place to try and alleviate this and assist the most vulnerable?
Well, you know that normally people depend on their SASSA grants, both from a point of view of the child support grant and the grants that go to the elderly and all other grants. But many of our communities, sometimes they are cushioned by the fact that when it's normal, they go to our community centers where they can be able to access food. Many of the children who are at home now are the children who rely on a school feeding scheme because they get their meals at school. And all those have then shut down because we needed to make sure that we reduce the infection and we reduce the number of people being in contact with each other. I'm sure you see in the news, on TV, you see people showing their refrigerators which are empty. You see, I'm sure you saw recently the communities of the Western Cape in particular pointing to the fact that even the legal that we have been trying to spread through the social relief of distress, there is usually what we get, food parcels that come through SASSA. Even our community centers where people normally go to and get the food, they're not getting the food. So here's what we are planning to do, which we have started doing anyway. Because remember that the way we operate as a Department of Social Development as well as SASSA, we operate at a local level. We've got offices of SASSA which unfortunately had to shut down again because we had to mitigate and make sure that the spread doesn't go too fast. We have those centers which we normally people go to. You can see that government is also moving towards easing some of the regulations to see how we can be able to reach out to those communities. SASSA has started distributing across the country, but obviously the volumes that are coming through now through the call centers at provincial and national level is beyond anyone's expectations. So we are working on a plan because even if we do have the food, we've just got to make sure that there's equal distribution to our communities. We cannot afford to have one area having food and the other not having the food. But then you also cannot distribute the food without a proper plan because you need to be able to appreciate we don't know how long this is going to take us. And therefore, even in the planning, you've got to make sure that what you get, you can stretch it out and not think that you're going to give out everything that you have in a week or two, and then in the next 3 or so months, you end up having no food. We've got systems in place, and we are just beginning to make sure that those systems are operating. But let me be frank, let me be honest, it's not possible for us to cover everyone within a short space of time. We are also accountable for what we do. We must make sure that our systems are in such a way that we have to reach out to the communities who are hardest hit, who do not have anything. So we've started the process already. And also we're looking at other options because we're thinking that it shouldn't be just the distribution of food parcels. It should also be empowering the communities where we can. We're looking at working with other organizations, looking at vouchers, if people can be given vouchers so that they don't come out in their big numbers to come now get the food parcels. We're looking at other mechanisms that can at least assist us to make sure that people don't move too much around in the areas where they are. With the Minister of Small Business Development, for instance, we're looking at the spaza shops, we're looking at the old, the retail shops have really been helping us here, they're up with us. But we're looking at systems that can make people not to move too far from where they are to access the food.
I know within the Muslim community, there's been a lot of effort to help the poor and the vulnerable. NGOs, even businesses have been going on hamper campaigns and getting food parcels. I'm sure other religious communities and communities in general are doing the same. In terms of your knowledge, how much of a role is civil society playing in assisting the poor as a result of the hunger?
That's why we are also calling on the community leaders to be in the forefront to coordinate and work with us on this one, because the community leaders, the NPOs, the NGOs, those are people who are normally out there with the communities under normal circumstances. So my department, looking at other community leaders such as churches, for instance, I'm very much aware of the fact that the South African Council of Churches reached out to the president with some proposals which we are looking at, which we hope that those proposals will be able to assist us in terms of ensuring that the program that they have as the South African Council of Churches, which also gives people vouchers and so forth, we're going to look into how can we expand that to the rest of the provinces. I think community leaders have stepped up, and many are doing the little that they can with the little food that they have. Then some of them are not even waiting for government, that I'm very sure of. They're looking at what they can do, and we also have a lot of private sector which have stepped up within the communities. Our request is that those private sector who are working, they must not go on their own to these communities without connecting to the structures on the ground, because they will be told where exactly is the food needed most than them just coming in, because we don't want a situation where it will cause chaos and cause a situation where some of our people say there's more food coming this way and that way. This whole challenge that we have needs us to have a coordinated approach to helping our people, and it's a plea to our people to appreciate that we want to reach out as far as we possibly can. We get unbelievable calls, and SASA is looking at expanding the call centers. But it's not about just the call center. It's about ensuring that you know when you get the call, where must it be directed to in terms of logistics and a whole host of other methods that we need to do to make sure that we reach out to our people.
There has been some talk, Minister, about increasing the amount of the social grants during the lockdown period. Is that something that government is considering?
Yes, absolutely. Remember that the child support grant also is below poverty line. It's 400 rands, and that's not enough. So we're looking at that child grant and seeing how we can increase that grant to an acceptable amount, which we know that at least communities can go by. Obviously, we must not look at it as just as an increase to the child grant. We must look at the cost thereof. And then we must, and where the money is going to come from, how we can shift monies here and there from a treasury as well as other departments. We must look at that. We've agreed on that, the fact that we need to increase that. We've agreed on looking at the grant for the elderly. Also, we have to increase that. The challenge we're going to have is that what period are we going to give in terms of if we increase it, how much can we increase and for how long we can increase, because there's post-COVID, and the post-COVID challenges also need to be dealt with. So the president will make the announcements once we have finalized the plans, once we have met over the weekend and on Monday, and the president will make the necessary announcements as to how much are we going to increase. But also we are looking at alternatives. You hear me talking about vouchers. We're looking at giving the vouchers so that people can also be able to manage in their homes, because it's one thing to give people food and see the challenge that people are at home. Unlike when you give them an increase and you give them the vouchers, most of the time they're not at home. This time around they're at home, and therefore them too managing what they have under these circumstances, because we didn't call this upon ourselves. They also need to help us as communities. Those that do receive the food, they have to be sparingly using the food, considering the fact that we don't know how long this is going to take us.
The aspect of the emotional toll that the lockdown is taking on the citizens of the country is something I'm sure that yourself and government is cognizant of. The easing of the restrictions in terms of kids moving between parents who are divorced or who are separated is something which I assume would be welcomed by many.
Yes, it's been welcomed by many. Remember that when the regulations were passed first by the Minister of COPTA, Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, we were all like waking up to a disaster in front of us, and then we really had to pull our resources together to look at what are the options that are there for South Africa. And one of those options was the lockdown itself, and then on top of that, the extension of that lockdown. So the movement of children, we already had directives which we developed out of the regulations that were passed by the minister. But then we also realized that our regulations and directives which we put together were not adequate to cover some of the people, especially the children, whom many had gone on holiday and they were with grandparents. Some of them were with the other partner and not the principal parent. So we had to look at and all that. And recently, as yesterday, for instance, we had to look into the movement of the children and ease a little bit on that to say those that wanted to get their children back, especially because from an academic point of view, many of the parents, especially the ones who are the principal parent, were saying the kids went away without their school kits, without many of their books, and now we want them back so that they can also be assisted and not be running around, and also be assisted to manage the time to assist them with their schooling. So we have eased that a little bit. Parents need to have their IDs, obviously. They need to have the birth certificate. They need to have something that proves that they are the parents, because one of the things that we need to watch out for, we must not forget that there are societal challenges that were there before this. Some children get lost in the process, and some parents take their children illegally, and we've got to watch out that children are not lost somewhere along the line. But we also have to make life easy for the police and the military, who are the ones who are trying to maintain law and order on the streets. So parents will be able to move, but there are strict guidelines as to what they need to have. Just when Minister Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, for instance, yesterday dealt with the regulation as far as what they need to move the parents, it was also then realized that there was a form which we were supposed to develop and make sure that it is filled, so that when the police find you on the road, you don't end up in a cell because you don't have the necessary documents. But here's also the issue. A plea we have made, I made this plea from the very beginning to say I'm very conscious and I'm aware of the fact that it's painful when parents don't have the children with them. But parents also need to be sensitive to the dangers and be conscious of the dangers of moving children from one to the other, not knowing whether even the person who's bringing the children, transporting the children, is safe or not. So it is a plea to the parents that these are their children. We know they know better for their children, but they also need to put themselves in the space of government trying to control, keep down, do the testing, the tracking, the quarantining, and all that. Parents need to also take that into consideration.
Finally, Minister, your message to our viewers tonight, 3 weeks now into the period of extension of another 2 weeks. Naturally, South Africans want to do the right thing. They want to do what's in the best interest of the country. At the same time, 3 weeks in, you're starting to feel the discomfort of being out of your normal routine of life for a prolonged period of time. What's your advice to our viewers tonight to conclude?
To conclude is just to really plead with our communities, plead with our citizens that you don't know when it's going to come through to you. You don't know how it's going to come through to you. Please follow the instructions and the guidelines and the messaging. And the messaging is not only coming from government. The messaging is coming from all responsible citizens who are asking people to stay at home, who are asking people to wash their hands, who are asking people to look around and make sure that they keep their places clean. And I know it's easier said than done when people are squashed in homes where there's more people than there are supposed to be in one house. But the bottom line is that the responsibility still remains with the residents of any given house or any given cuckoo or any given RDP house or any given space, whether it's in rural areas or whatever. If it comes to you, you must understand the dangers that the death in South Africa, also the number of people who are dying is climbing. It might look like it's climbing very slowly. Even those that are infected, it might look like it's climbing very slowly. Government is out there. We've now tested more than 100,000 people. Government will still continue to intensify the testing so that those that are found to have contracted COVID-19 coronavirus, then they are quarantined and they're taken away so that they can be able to be assisted. And this message that I want to pass in the main refers to the fact that the most vulnerable are the elderly. And the elderly are usually the people who take care of children at home. But by the way, the elderly are usually the ones that keep law and order inside their house. They are the ones who teach the children from the day they are born children. They nurse them, they take care of them. Can they also take a responsibility of ensuring that they are safe? Because they are the ones who are more in the vulnerable space. Because if they catch it, if you are above 60, if you are in your 70s and 80s, you are vulnerable. And if you end up in hospital, the chances are that the doctors are finding it very difficult and your immune system is much weaker than the young ones. It's a plea from us to say, we are with you. We understand the pain that you are going through. We are just saying, let's look at it like we are in a war situation. Unfortunately, we are fighting an enemy that is invisible, that can only move through people. It can't move on the street or have a gun or anything of that sort. It's a virus that moves from one person to the next person, and the effects thereof are really devastating. So it's a plea to our communities. Let's hold hands. And let's not point fingers left, right, and center. Those who must be accountable for what they are supposed to do, ourselves as government, when we say we are going to do this, we must do it. We have to reach as many people as we possibly can. We will come out of this, but the cost when we come out of this is going to be quite devastating if we don't really all stand up and say, even though we are hungry, even though we are this, we must just watch out that the virus doesn't come our way.
All right, Minister, we really thank you for your time this evening on ITV. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Have a great evening and all the best to you and to government in continuing to lead us during this very difficult period.
Thank you, and thank you to the communities who are also like really pulling together, the NPOs, the NGOs, the churches, everyone there who's doing an extra mile, the business people who are out there with whatever they have. I wish what is happening now could be extended so that ultimately in South Africa we should stop using the word poorest of the poor, because we shouldn't be having poorest of the poor. If we're able to pull like the way we're pulling right now, we can be able to deal with it sustainably, developmentally, so that when we come out of this, we should look at the system that has enabled us to be where we are as South Africa. The world is looking at us and the world is marveling at how much we are doing, and we cannot pull this without the understanding of our communities.
Have a good evening, Minister. Really appreciate your time.
Good evening to you too. Thank you.
That was Minister Lindiwe Zulu, the Minister of Social Development. We take a break. When we come back, we're speaking to Moulana Mohammed Venke. Welcome back. Now we cross over to Durban. Joining us on the line, well-known Imam and scholar, Moulana Mohammed Venke. Moulana, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you, Moulana, and assalamu alaikum to the esteemed viewers of ITV. Barakallahu feekum, and hope you're keeping well on this beautiful Friday night.
Now, alhamdulillah, under the circumstances, 3 weeks into lockdown, another 2 weeks to go, and then we don't know what happens thereafter. But it's a week to Ramadan. Next week, this time, inshallah, we will be in the blessed month. What's your assessment as a scholar, as a community leader? How are people in the Muslim community coping?
Well, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Moulana, since the lockdown, as imams, as somebody who's involved in the community, what we have found is that, mashallah, people are inching closer to Allah. I mentioned this a few weeks ago, when I was asked of my opinion, and I said that perhaps this is an opportunity for each and every one of us to press the reset button, for us to navigate our lives, to get closer to the Almighty Allah. And I personally have interacted with many, many people, on social media, people who normally on a Friday, would attend the masjid and perhaps to, the last few minutes of the Jumu'ah lecture. These are individuals who are showing such inclination, for knowledge that, there is this thirst that, all of a sudden in the last 2 weeks, people are inquiring that, why don't you, use social media and at least we could learn. We're sitting at home. This is an opportunity, mashallah. So there are many brothers that I know personally have mentioned to me that in their lives, they have not read so much of Quran like they have read in the lockdown. Subhanallah, this is absolutely, amazing. There are brothers that I have interacted with. They said that in their lives, salah was something which was occasional every now and then. But alhamdulillah, since the lockdown, let alone 5 times salah, they are reading tahajjud salah, chash, and, the other various askar and du'as, with their families. And mashallah, we have, for many of us, we have transformed our homes into places of ibadah, our homes into places of worship. And this is absolutely, absolutely amazing. So like they say in English, that a positive thinker finds an opportunity in every difficulty, and a negative thinker finds a negative thinker finds a difficulty in every opportunity. So we find that although outwardly, it appears to be doom and gloom, but, from a spiritual perspective, I think there are many, many, positives that we can take out of the lockdown.
We are a week away from the great month of Ramadan, and people are bracing themselves that at least 6 days of the Mubarak and blessed month of Ramadan will be spent under the lockdown in its current form. What advice would you give in terms of how do you prepare now for the first time in your life, Taraweeh at home and not in the masajid, iftar at home, not in the masajid, having these restrictions during the month of Ramadan? What opportunities are there and what kind of mindset should a Muslim have going into this first week of Ramadan?
Yes, absolutely, Moulana. It's all about conditioning the mind. I mentioned this, I think, on Radio Islam as well a few days ago, that unfortunately, for many of us, we are driven by rituals. So on a certain night, the 15th night of Sha'ban, 27th of Rajab, we normally, visit the masajid, during the blessed month of Ramadan, for the first few nights, we attach ourselves to the masajid. But this is an opportunity. In fact, the amount of people that are inquiring in terms of Taraweeh, how do we perform Taraweeh with our families? Can I read, with my wife? So indeed, I think this is an opportunity that, many of us never experienced in our lives. And Allah alone knows whether we would experience another Ramadan like this. But alhamdulillah, I think, for the last few weeks, we've been bracing ourselves, for Ramadan, mashallah, the 15th night of Sha'ban, we were inundated. Many brothers mentioned that, that's the night, it's like the kickstart to the blessed month of Ramadan. And, we created an environment from the 15th night of Sha'ban in our homes. We are making Quran tilawat together. We are performing salat together. We are having, dhikr programs together. So as a Muslim, we should be, unfortunately, what happens, we need people around us, to motivate ourselves. But now, alhamdulillah, it's an opportunity for us to, with our families to create, the Islamic, environment within our homes. Many of us, we break our fast in the masajid at the time of iftar. For the first week, perhaps, of Ramadan, this would not be happening and we would be breaking our fast at home. But I think one advantage that we have, today with social media, unlike in the years gone by, we had cassettes and that was the only, avenue via which people could listen to lectures. Now at the touch of a button, mashallah, you could communicate with somebody, on another part of the globe. So, these are various opportunities that we have, at least to inch a little closer. It is the month of Quran. it is the month wherein, we need to attach ourselves, to Quran Kareem. And, something very important, I mentioned this many a times, that unfortunately, we have not studied the language of Quran. We have barred ourselves from volumes of Islamic knowledge. We have barred ourselves from volumes of Islamic knowledge. So this is an ideal opportunity for us to understand, what is the message of Quran? What is the message of Allah Rabbul Izzati, wal Jalal? So perhaps, I think a great lesson that we take, perhaps, exactly a week, perhaps plus minus before the month of Ramadan starts, I think it's an opportunity for us to, inch a little closer to Quran Kareem and make an effort, inshallah, to try and understand the message of Allah Rabbul Izzati wal Jalal.
The issue of a Muslim's relationship with the masjid is a very strong one. I mean, there's a lot of emotion. Muslims frequent the masjid 5 times a day, unlike others who perhaps frequent a place of worship once a week. There has been a lot of emotion, a lot of discussion, a lot of debate within the community as to whether it is correct for masajid to remain closed whilst taxi ranks are open and supermarkets are open, and now restrictions are being uplifted gradually and in a phase by phase kind of situation. What are your thoughts and what is your message to the community in the midst of this? There are divergent viewpoints. There are those who feel, no, the masjid should be open, we should be calling for it, we should be exploring every legal and other avenue to get our masajid open. And there are others who are saying that let's be responsible and see whatever we can do in terms of preserving life and preserving good health. How should Muslims navigate around this very emotive, hot topic, which is currently in the Muslim community playing out in different ways and forms?
Moulana, I would perhaps answer the question, in 2 ways. One is when we look at the hadith of the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, under the chapter Imatatul Adha Anit Tariq, that if there is an obstacle, on the pathway which potentially, could harm someone, then you should move it away. For somebody perhaps could get injured. Here we are speaking about human life. Human life is sacred. I've heard this argument, in fact, a few minutes ago, somebody had sent me an article. They said in South Africa, 50 have passed away. What's the big deal about it? In other countries, there are thousands of people that have passed away. What's the big deal about it? My brothers and sisters, we will only understand and appreciate the gravity of the problem is when somebody around me is affected with it. Unfortunately, today we have become individuals. We are not part of the broader ummah. And I always say this with regards to the differences of opinion. I mentioned this many a times that the definition of the unification of this ummah is not consensus on one view. The definition of the unification of the ummah is not consensus on one view, simply because if any person has this intention of unifying the ummah by bringing them onto consensus, I'm afraid, my brothers and sisters, by its very definition, it's a flawed definition. The Sahaba were the most united. The Sahaba were the most united. They differed on so many issues. Wallahi, we can have a different opinion, but as long as our hearts are united, we are progressing as an ummah. Wallahi, there are multitudes of examples, cited in the Quran and the Hadith. There is the scholar in America, in fact, he's mentioned it many a times, Sheikh Siraj Wahaj. He gives an amazing example. He said one day there was the scholar, this alim, was preparing his Jumu'ah lecture, and he was trying to gather his thoughts and put together his lecture, and his child was next to him, and the child was interjecting. I mean, kids are kids today. You give them the toy cell phone, they want the real one. You give them the pen, they want the one that you are using. So what he does, he finds a magazine, and he opens it up, and he finds the map of the world. He thought to himself, you know what? At least I can keep my son busy. He takes the map of the world. He cuts it up into a puzzle. Africa, Asia, China, Europe. And he calls his son and he says, my boy, put the puzzle together. He thinks to himself, at least I would have a few minutes to gather my thoughts and put together this lecture. 5 minutes down the line, his son comes and he says, Dad, the puzzle is done. Like they say in English, apples don't fall too far from the trees. So the father says, what do you mean it's done? This young boy looks at his dad And he said, don't look at the map of the world. Look behind the map. It was the picture of a man. This was a simple puzzle to put together. I put the eyes in place. I put the nose in place. I put the ears in place. I put the feet in place. The father says, my boy, you have taught me one of the greatest lessons of life. When man comes together, the world will come in order. My brothers, honestly, and I say the statement, fearing the Almighty Allah, Nabi alayhi salam, he came to unite the hearts of the ummah. Unfortunately, today, in the name of deen, we are creating this unity. We are creating this fragmentation. You know, this man is from this scholar, is from this camp, and that scholar is from that camp. Allah alone knows. Allah alone knows. Let us not do the job of the Almighty Allah. Let us not forget, my brothers and sisters, I personally have interacted, you know, with scholars, with people that are living in other countries, and they themselves have mentioned, you know, the plight, you know, the situation on the ground, you know, loved ones. I mentioned this earlier on today in one of the discourses that I had given. There is a brother that passed away in Durban. He passed away yesterday, 34 years of age. He had contracted the virus. Allah alone knows. He didn't travel anywhere. He contracted the virus. This brother is a breadwinner. This brother is the breadwinner. He's supporting his wife and he's got kids at home. What happens to his family? Whilst you and I are busy debating, should we open the masajid? Should we close the masajid? Allah alone knows. I mentioned this. I am the imam of a masjid. The day when we announced the lockdown, my heart cries. I mentioned this to the audience, to the musallis, that perhaps this is the saddest moment in my life, that we will not be able to enter the masjid. But we are living in a non-Muslim country. We enjoy freedom of religion. The circumstances, I mentioned this, no person, there's no, let alone an alim, there's no person in the right frame of mind, a person who's far away from the deen of Allah, who would tell you to shut the doors of the masjid. We need to understand the circumstances are a little different. I mentioned earlier on, my brothers, let it not be, and sisters, that until it affects someone in my family, then only I will understand, you know, the gravity of this problem. You know, to engage in debates, you know, we can voice our opinions, that's fine. But where we start becoming personal, we start attacking, we become judgmental. The Quran gives us the guidelines. Our reference for guidance and navigation is the kalam of Allah. قُلْ كُلٌّ يَعْمَلُ عَلَى شَاكِلَتِي فَرَبُّكُمْ أَعْلَمُ. Every person is trying to reach Allah in his own way. Differences of opinion were inevitable. It happened to the best of the best. How did they deal with it, and how are we dealing with it? Perhaps it's a separate topic altogether, but it saddens the heart when we see, you know, on social media, you know, ordinary laymen commenting about scholars and ulama. My brothers and sisters, Hassan Basri used to say, لَوْلَا الْعُلَمَا لَصَارَ النَّاسُ مِثْلَ الْبَهَائِمِ. Had it not been because of the scholars and the ulama, the general masses would have become like animals. Open the ahadith of Bukhari. What did the Nabi of Allah say? Yurfa'ul ilm. Knowledge will be taken away. How would this happen? Allah will take scholars and ulama away. Recently, we have seen how many scholars have left this world. I swear by Allah, it leaves a void that cannot be substituted. And the second interpretation, respect for ulama would become absent. My brothers and sisters, if you do not agree, you do not accept a verdict of a scholar and an alim, and Moulana, before I hand over, you know, something that comes to mind, Malik bin Dinar used to say, Malik bin Dinar, that shahadatul qurra maqboola fi kulli shay illa shahadatu ba'dihim ala ba'din. Perhaps these words need to be engraved in gold. What did he say? I will accept the evidence of a scholar openly, provided your intentions are clear. Your intention is not to fragment the ummah. Your intention is not to run down the same fraternity. And we see it happening today. How sad a sight, you know, where we find ordinary laymen commenting about scholars and ulama. This is something which the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in a lengthy narration, you know, when he made dua, that, oh Allah, unite the hearts of my ummah, he said a time will come close to Qiyamah. And this is a manifestation of those statements that Allah's Nabi had mentioned more than 1400 years ago.
Moulana, shukran so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Jazakallah khair, Moulana. Barakallahu feekum for the opportunity, and Allah preserve and protect you, and Allah use you as an inspiration, inshallah, to disseminate this beautiful deen. Barakallahu feekum. Jazakallah khairan for the opportunity.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
That was Moulana Muhammad Venk speaking to us live from Durban this evening on the program, some pertinent words of advice. As we wrap up the program for this evening and also for the pre-Ramadan period, next week Friday, it's going to be Taraweeh, inshallah. From what I understand, we have to look for the moon on Thursday night. So if you sight the moon on Thursday night is first Taraweeh and Friday night will be second Taraweeh. If not, then Friday night will be the first Taraweeh and Saturday will be the first fast. It's not the ideal circumstance to be deprived of the Masjid during the month of Ramadan especially, but it is what it is. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is testing us, and we must continue to make dua to Allah to uplift this test and to uplift the clutches of this virus, not only from us but from all of humanity, so that life can return to normal. People are suffering all across the globe, not only in a religious sense but in economical sense and a social sense and a political sense as well. But it's still the month of Ramadan. All the blessings of the month are there, all the rewards of the month are there, and this crisis gives us certain opportunities, as Moulana has explained. Let's maximize on those opportunities, and we can still make it a most rewarding, a most fulfilling, a most beneficial Ramadan, a Ramadan that will bring us closer to Allah and keep us closer to Allah, inshallah. Right, so during the month of Ramadan, in all likelihood, we'll be meeting on Sunday mornings. We'll be meeting on Sunday mornings, and we'll be coming to you live on Sunday mornings during the month of Ramadan. Remember us in your du'as. Stay home, stay safe. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.